Our film today is about the island of Gretel, a magical place filled with princes, princesses, and mythical creatures. The story begins with Merlin, one of the island's greatest 7 heroes, who narrates the tale. He recalls how the island was once attacked by a gigantic dragon, but they managed to defeat it. Suddenly, a princess appeared, but unlike the others, she wasn't beautiful. Merlin and the 7 heroes mistook her for an evil witch and attacked her. However, she turned out to be a fairy princess. In revenge, she cursed them, transforming them into 7 strange-looking dwarfs. The curse could only be broken by a kiss from the most beautiful woman in the world. Then, we see a queen standing before the mystical gray tree. She speaks to it, asking for the shoes of eternal youth and beauty. Suddenly, one of the red apples turns into a shoe. She puts it on and transforms into a stunning young woman, but the effect fades quickly, and she returns to her original form. Frustrated, the queen shouts, "How long must I wait?" and storms off. Later, a girl sneaks into the room and begins searching through drawers and photos near the gray tree. She's clearly looking for something. Suddenly, one of the queen's servants enters. The girl quickly hides. The servant notices the rope she used to climb in, but ignores it and leaves. She resumes her search and finally finds the book she was looking for. As she opens it, she reads the story of Snow White and discovers that this is her story from her 18th birthday. At the celebration, a beautiful sorceress named Regina arrived and married Snow White's father. Everything seemed perfect until people started disappearing one by one. Her father eventually learned the truth from his magic mirror. He saw Regina speaking with the gray tree and, fearing for Snow White, decided to send her away. He told her that if she ever found the book, she must search for the 7 heroes to save her. The girl approaches the gray tree and puts on the enchanted shoe. Instantly, she transforms into a breathtaking beauty. She is Snow White. Suddenly, Queen Regina bursts in with her guards, trying to capture her. But Snow White grabs a magical staff and escapes, flying out of the kingdom. Enraged, Regina asks her magic mirror, "Who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replies, "The girl wearing the red shoes." Furious, Regina orders her guards to spread wanted posters across the city and capture her. Meanwhile, the 7 heroes reappear. As they talk, they notice something flying above them and follow it. It leads them to Snow White's home. When they enter, they are stunned by her beauty. But suddenly, one of them sneaks up behind her and knocks her down. The rest just stand there, staring at her in awe. The heroes stared in disbelief. Impossible. How could anyone be this beautiful? How did she even get here? Snow White suddenly woke up, startled by the strange appearance of the 7 heroes. But instead of running, she apologized for entering their house. She was simply hungry. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. Her beauty was overwhelming, her body perfectly shaped. She asked the heroes, "Do you see me like this too?" They replied, in awe, "You look like an angel." When they asked for her name, she lied and said, "I'm the girl with the red shoes." They told her she couldn't possibly be just an ordinary girl. She must be a princess. Merlin introduced himself and then presented the others: Jack, Hales, Arthur, Donnie, Ducky, and Q. Shocked, she said, "These are the names of the 7 heroes," and confessed she was looking for them to help find her father. Merlin told her they weren't the famous 7 heroes, but they knew her well, and they could help her find her father. Each of them then started bragging that he could find her father faster than the others to win her heart. Merlin added, "You have no other choice. The real 7 heroes disappeared a year ago." Snow White thanked them, saying they were kind and that she didn't think they looked strange at all. Merlin whispered to himself, "She must be the one to break our curse." Meanwhile, Prince Offwark was furious that none of the famous princesses had agreed to attend his birthday party. Suddenly, the sorceress Regina appeared, handing him a picture of Snow White. She told him the girl had stolen her magical shoes and escaped. If he wanted her at his party, he'd have to go and find her himself. Offwark agreed. Later, Snow White was sketching a portrait of her father and gazed into the mirror. "He won't recognize me like this," she whispered. She removed the shoes and returned to her original form. But when one of the dwarfs knocked on her door, she quickly put them back on before answering. He offered her a face mask treatment, but but she politely declined, saying she wanted to rest. Looking out the window, she spotted something moving in the forest. Thinking it might be her father, she snuck out alone. The 7 heroes were in their true human forms. But the moment Snow White looked at them, they reverted back to dwarfs. While wandering through the forest, she encountered a giant rabbit. Merlin appeared just in time, electrocuting the beast with his magic. He grabbed her hand, and they ran together. For a brief moment, Merlin transformed into a handsome young man. But when Snow White looked at him, he turned back into a dwarf. The rabbit was still after them. Merlin begged her not to look back, so he could stay in his true form and fight. But when she looked again, he changed back, and the rabbit stomped on him. Arthur came to help, but he too transformed into a dwarf once she looked at him. He pretended to be injured just to win her sympathy. "You shouldn't be in the forest alone," he said. "It's dangerous. But if you ever need anything, I'm brave and strong, and I'll be there for you." Snow White thanked him, but when he asked for a kiss, she slapped him and walked away. The next morning, she gave them a picture of her father, so they could start the search. Arthur, being clever, made a plan to go with her alone, hoping she'd fall in love with him and break the curse. Merlin, meanwhile, stayed at the house, guarding the rabbit they had captured. He began negotiating with it. A few carrots, in exchange for letting him ride its back and follow the others. Snow White and the dwarves set out to search for her father. She asked everyone she met, and all who saw her were stunned by her enchanting beauty. Suddenly, she noticed a wanted poster with her face on it. Guards of Prince Ovwark spotted her and gave chase, but Snow White quickly removed her red shoes, transforming back to her ordinary self. They didn't recognize her and let her go. Moments later, the city guards arrived and seized her magical shoes, tossing them among themselves playfully. Snow White pleaded for them to return her shoes, but they refused. Meanwhile, the dwarves were searching for her. They saw her in her original form and didn't recognize her either, so they walked away. Then Merlin appeared, electrocuted the guards, and returned the shoes to her. He asked if they had met before. She said no. He walked away mysteriously, leaving her puzzled. She wore her shoes again and transformed back. The guards saw her once more, so Merlin carried her on the back of the giant rabbit and fled. Back home, he asked why the guards were chasing her, and she explained the shoes were magical and highly desired. Merlin came up with an idea. He painted her father's image with flowers and wrote beneath it, "Please contact us." Snow White thanked him, and while he expected a kiss, she simply blew flower petals in his face. Later, Overwork's guards saw the flower portrait and discovered the princess's location. Meanwhile, Merlin and Hans argued over who was ruining their relationship with Snow White. Arthur told Merlin he was nothing without his magic. Suddenly, a net fell on them. Overwork's guards had arrived. Hans was preparing sweets for the princess, and Jack tried to give her a diamond ring, but she refused. Then Overwork appeared outside their house with soldiers, demanding they hand over Snow White. She stepped outside, and all the guards were stunned by her beauty. Even Prince Overwork was in awe, calling her angelic. She asked him to release Hans and Merlin, but he ordered her to attend his birthday as a royal command. Snow White slapped him. The guards lunged to seize her, but the 7 dwarves stood their ground, using magic to defend her. They fought fiercely until the house collapsed on Overwork and his men. He vowed to return. That night, Snow White and Merlin sat and spoke. He confessed he looked even better in his true form and considered himself handsome. She told him she loved him no matter his appearance, even if he were a dwarf. She tried to take off her shoes to reveal her true self, but couldn't. Merlin tried to help, but failed. Elsewhere, the witch Regina furiously scolded Overwork for failing to capture Snow White. Still, she gave him one final chance and handed him 3 enchanted apples. Overwork and 2 of his guards ate them, turning into towering tree trunks. At the same time, the dwarves and Snow White worked together to rebuild their destroyed home. Pino, Nokio, and Q, 3 look-alike dwarves, had built a giant wooden machine that helped them restore the house. Then they discover a machine capable of producing many copies of the pictures of her father that Snow White had drawn. Merlin thought of installing the magic wand in their invention so they could distribute the pictures all over the city. Snow White was very happy with this, hugging them all, and then they flew together, living beautiful moments. She told him that she was lucky to have met him. They then threw all over the city pictures of her father. Merlin kept dreaming of kissing Snow White, but suddenly they bumped into a tree and fell to the ground. Snow White wanted to tell him about her magical shoes and her old appearance. They continued talking, and Merlin asked her to close her eyes so he could kiss her, thinking that he had returned to his handsome form and that the curse had been broken. But when Snow White opened her eyes, she found that he had not changed at all. Merlin was surprised and said, "How can he remain the same?" Snow White kissed him, and she's the most beautiful girl in the world. Suddenly, a monster in the shape of a tree appeared, and it was Offwork and his guards. He began chasing them. Merlin asked Snow White to stay away from him and not look at him. She promised him that she wouldn't look at him. Merlin continued fighting them until he knocked Offwork into the water. Then he called out to Snow White. She looked at him, and Merlin grabbed her, and they both fell into the water together. Without thinking, Snow White jumped into the water to save him, while he was trapped under a huge rock. Her shoe fell into the water, and the witch's guards saw them. The witch was talking to the magic mirror, ordering it to go retrieve the shoe from Snow White. At that moment, Merlin saw her true form without the shoe and was very upset. Snow White explained to him that her real name was Snow White, and that her father was King White, who had married the evil witch. It was she who sent the monsters to take her shoe. She added that if she didn't have the shoe, Merlin would not have helped her. She felt sad and fell asleep, while Merlin took a walk and talked to himself, saying that he loved the red shoe, not Snow White. He loved the red shoe while he was a dwarf, and her appearance didn't matter to him. Snow White wore her shoe again and continued walking, thinking about her memories with Merlin. But she saw him again and told him that she thought he had left. Merlin asked her to take off her shoe, but she couldn't. Then she saw him give her an apple and ask her to eat it. Suddenly, the real Merlin appeared behind her and called out to her. It was the witch Regina, who wanted to subdue her to get the shoe. Suddenly, the witch kidnapped Snow White and took her to the palace, while Merlin rode on the huge rabbit's back, racing to rescue Snow White. Merlin left a message with the witch's guards for his friends to print many copies of his cards, and then they went to help him. The dwarfs prepared themselves to go rescue Snow White and Merlin. Merlin entered a room inside the palace, where the witch had tied up Snow White. She asked her to eat the apple, and Snow White asked Witch Regina about the location of her father, but the witch refused to tell her. Merlin entered, bound, and Regina asked Snow White to eat the apple or she would kill Merlin. Snow White chose to eat the apple and began to transform. The mirror was the one who had tied up Merlin. He asked about Snow White's fate, and the mirror replied that she would turn into a cursed red apple tree, and this apple would turn into a magical shoe. Regina placed the shoe on her foot so she would become the most beautiful woman in the city. He asked about Snow White's fate, and she replied that she would lose her life and die. Merlin freed himself and tried to escape, but she caught him and bound him again. However, the other dwarfs entered and saved Merlin, and they fought the enchanted mirror. The witch stood in front of Snow White, who had turned into a tree, waiting for the sunrise to gain eternal beauty. Merlin jumped on the witch, threw her out of the palace, and used his magic to destroy her. Everything returned to normal, and everyone returned to their true forms. Snow White hugged her father and asked about Merlin, who told her that he sacrificed himself to free them from Witch Regina. Snow White kept calling for him and crying, and suddenly Merlin appeared, but he was unable to speak and looked disheveled. He told her she was the most beautiful girl in the world, and Snow White hugged him and kissed him. Merlin returned to his handsome form, and they got married. The city lived in peace again. And that's the end of our movie. We hope you subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get all our new videos. Goodbye.